Today, we'll be diving into one of the most groundbreaking shifts in modern aerospace, the drive for sustainability and green innovation. And as global industries race to reduce their carbon footprint, aerospace companies are at the forefront of exploring and implementing sustainable technologies. And today, we'll discuss three major areas: electric propulsion, hydrogen-based fuel systems, and we'll also discuss some current challenges for sustainable innovation. But first, let's dive into some major news makers for the aerospace and defense industry for October 2024.
Let's kick off with the major events in aerospace and defense industry for October 2024. Here are some of the top stories. The U.S. Army unveils autonomous surveillance drone. On October 1st, U.S. Army introduced the Horus A high-altitude autonomous stratospheric drone developed by AeroVironment. This solar-powered drone is capable of months-long surveillance missions, marking a significant advancement in aerial surveillance technology. NASA Artemis 3 prepares for lunar mission. NASA announced the final stages of the preparation for Artemis 3, the first crewed lunar landing of the 21st century, scheduled for early 2025. This mission will place astronauts on the moon's surface as a part of NASA's broader goals for sustainable lunar exploration and future Mars missions. Airbus expands sustainability efforts. Airbus revealed advancement in its hydro-powered Zero-E aircraft program during the Global Aerospace Summit. These prototypes are designed to achieve zero emissions and could enter service as early as 2035, positioning Airbus as a leader in sustainable aviation. Rob, what newsmakers are catching your attention for this episode?
Man, I think I love what everything that Airbus is doing right now for sustainability. And I think that's, perfectly coincides with our topic this today. I think in aerospace, sustainability is a key initiative for a lot of companies this year, and it's great to see a lot of that programs coming out of Airbus right now with their engines and programs.
And to your point, like as far as what Airbus does, the rest of the industry follows, right? Between themselves and Boeing is moving there towards it. So, obviously Airbus has got their zero emissions, but the jet engines and that technology from that perspective is coming from all the jet engine makers, Pratt and Whitney, GE, all those will have a version. So everybody is following suit to follow that, even with the materials and other things that are needed to hit to that goal for 2035. So it's a very exciting time for the industry.
Yep, and it's great to be witnessing the first mover in that industry. So kudos to Airbus, everything they're doing there. The other piece of check bounces out for me is really the autonomous surveillance drone. Having a solar powered drone capable of months long of surveillance missions is, majorly significant for the industry, because that only not only allows the defense programs to, witness what they could do for that capability, but it also opens the door for so many other drone type vehicles that are going to be, in development in the near future.
Yeah, and it's in my wheelhouse here, particularly from a surveillance perspective and ISR capabilities that our services are needed for future missions. With these month-long surveillances, we can not only deal with an adversarial threat, but also you think about weather threats, you think about all types of things that happens from, hurricanes happening, weather, from as well as like, volcanoes erupting, all kinds of things that can help finding lost people at sea, lost ships, things like that are important for us to have out there in this space. And I'm glad the Army actually released this, and it's a good thing for our country as well as the world.
Yeah, and I'll just echo, the scientific application for this is, I think, endless. Like you mentioned, and so much surveillance that could go on from a weather and things like that. But yeah, I think scientists and researchers are definitely happy for this to be, ready to be unveiled.
Yeah, agreed.
Now let's shift gears to discuss some of the key sustainability initiatives going on within the aerospace and defense industry. We'll separate these into major segments while wrapping up with some important challenges and opportunities. So, our first segment is really around the push for green innovation in aerospace. So, the aerospace industry has traditionally been associated with high fuel consumption and carbon emissions, and for good reason. And according to the Air Transport Action Group, aviation contributes about probably 2 to 3% of global carbon emissions. So that's a substantial amount. With regulatory pressures and a growing demand for sustainability air travel, aerospace companies are now investing heavily in greener technology solutions. But this is not just about your meeting regulatory standards. It's about maintaining market relevance and the consumer trust. And why is this important? So you have the impact of global warming, impacts on the earth, et cetera. So a lot of that is coming to fruition for a lot of the aerospace companies, why there's a major initiatives for going out through this year. Dewayne, talk to me a little bit more about the business perspective for this.
Well, the shift is, gives you both challenges and opportunities with anything when you're thinking about business. So there are substantial R&D costs to transition from from a traditional energy source to a new one, obviously, right? If you think about how we're even doing from electric power vehicles now, from what we're doing here, even on the ground. So imagine pushing that for something that's in the air and you got people on it. And so you got to think about all those, not only the trust impact you got to do, the proving from just to prove the science, but having the consumer, me and you, get on a aircraft that's not fuel powered, it's hydroelectric or something like that. That is also a trust that has to get into when you get through from a marketing perspective. So, firms are definitely looking towards those ways because actually being having a sustainable technology is good for business. It's just the span of the business case is just longer, but it also drives, those things that why you exist in this world to not only, go make a profit and to provide a service, but also do no harm to the environment that you live in. So it's also critically important for that perspective. So there's going to be some first to market here, but there's also going to be a lot once somebody figures it out. And once that consumer trust happens, it's going to open the floodgates out there because everybody is moving towards it, but it's important we get there.
I can totally agree with that. Yeah, it's amazing to see the progression here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start with segment 2 and talk about electric propulsion and its current state and challenges, right? The idea of electric airplanes has been around for years, but only recently we've seen a meaningful advancements in that from firms like Rolls-Royce, Airbus, Collins Aerospace, Pratt & Whitney, and startups like Aviation are making strides towards bringing electric power aircraft to the skies. The key advantage of electric propulsion is the potential to reduce emissions, like we talked about earlier. But you can also imagine increase in an industry that may come about from that, particularly when you think about an aircraft that doesn't need fuel, but it needs batteries. And so that's a different image for sustainability as well as a different business case. Right? What do you think?
From a technical perspective, electric propulsion for aerospace still has a considerable hurdles to go tackle. So that battery technology that you mentioned is advancing, but the energy density needed for larger, long-range aircraft just isn't there yet. For instance, Boeing 747, for instance, has and would require an enormous amount of battery energy, but it's far heavier than the traditional fuel to fly the same distances. So, you're having that capability there, but also you're adding a ton of weight to the whole vehicle. So to tackle this, firms are working on lighter materials, more efficient battery chemistries, and hybrid systems that combine electric and traditional propulsion for longer flights. What about from a business perspective, Dewayne?
Yeah, again, like we talked about, when you're in this spaces, right? There's a high R&D cost to get these technologies off the ground, but there's a significant upside, right? Because, like I talked about earlier, there's a domino effect where whatever airlines and aircraft OEMs who pioneer the electric propulsion, that just follows through and flows through the entire value stream, right? So again, if you have a hydro or electric propulsion or a hybrid system from electric jet engine to do propulsion, obviously you need lighter materials for that engine. You need a battery source for that. And so there's opportunity for those folks who are in that space to, push the envelope from a technology perspective. And it also puts you in a position to really talk about this is what and own in the sustainability discussion from an environment perspective. It also has some benefit from a future savings cost where you can there the ROI comes in where now you have lower operational and maintenance costs because you got this hybrid electric propulsion system, and that'll showcase in your number of visits to the shop as well as the number of visits that you have. So it'll flow through the entire value stream from a cost perspective.
Wow. Appreciate that, Dwayne. So now we shift to segment three, which is hydrogen-based fuel systems. So what is that path to zero emission flights? One of the most promising fuels for a zero emissions future in aerospace is hydrogen. So companies like Airbus are, investing in hydrogen as a clean alternative. Hydrogen fuel produces only water as a byproduct, making it incredibly attractive for environmental standpoint. So hydrogen-based fuel systems are complex. So while hydrogen fuel cells can power electric motors in aircraft, hydrogen storage is challenging because it needs to be stored in a very low temperature or extremely high pressure. So this requires the development of advanced storage technologies and cryogenic systems that can be implemented at scale. So Airbus recently announced its advanced concepts for a hydrogen-powered aircraft that could potentially enter service by 2035. But there's still significant testing and development required to make this feasible. So Dwayne, tell me more about how this affects from a business side.
Again, newer technology, bringing something new to bear to market. Definitely some challenges, but hydrogen represents a massive potential, right? So, we can pull hydrogen is one of those base chemicals, just hydrogen, oxygen, things like that. And so it's easier to access, but now you have to develop the systems and the technology to harness power via hydrogen. As you talked about earlier, you need some advanced how to store it, and you also need to keep it at a high pressure to keep it cold. And so it's very important that you have those cryo coolers and systems like that at scale so you can manage it to do it from a jet propulsion perspective. It also positions these companies to, meet and potentially exceed the emissions. And again, you're first to market again. And the hydrogen infrastructure not only leads to planes, but it's, you got better airports, you got fuel suppliers, regulatory agencies that's got to play a whole part in this. And so, again, when you're thinking about new fuel systems and new front end of just R&D that's got to have a full-fledged investment. This is one of those things that's going to happen that you're going to need. And I really, we're excited about the Airbus release, what they have that's just done, and other companies are to bear as well, both from a small regional jet perspective. So we are in the future. It's just now proving that in, and then the business case for that for these companies because they believe that we're gonna have a less impact on our planet.
So as we wrap up our segments, we want to discuss, what is the road ahead and what are those challenges and opportunities that we're facing. So as exciting as these technologies are, the road for sustainable aviation isn't without its challenges. So electric propulsion, hydrogen fuel, carbon offsets and all have their limitations, but there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Large-scale investments are essential, as are the policy support and public-private partnerships to create these necessary infrastructure. Nonetheless, the potential impact of these innovations are immense. Future where flying has a minimal carbon footprint will represent a major leap in our fight against climate change. Dwayne, what do you see as, opportunities from business and
well, again, it's that R&D and science base what you're doing in near term. These companies are just integrating their competitive technology muscle and then doing some prove-ins, doing a lot of that work, and then just potentially trying to gain market share from a future perspective, right? And that's how you do. As you know, it takes you 8 to 10 years to build a new aircraft particularly from a basic jet fuel one. Imagine what will happen if we have a different propulsion system, different materials, things like that that you got to bring to bear. So it is exciting time, like I said earlier. But again, it's about if we want something that's sustainable and necessary for a more feasible, less impact onto the planet. These things are a necessity for the industry, and the industry is going to get there, as we see now, and particularly great the years of, I would look at 2030 years in 2035 is when we're going to really start seeing these new technologies come to bear where people are actually flying on these type of aircraft, even sooner, actually.
Wow. I can't wait for that.
That's it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in to Brothers in Aerospace and Defense. We hope you gain valuable insights on this journey into the future of green aerospace innovation. As we've seen, the industry commitment to sustainability goes beyond a bunch of different technologies, and it's about reshaping the foundations of aviation.
So stay tuned as we continue to explore the exciting, transformative trends that are shaping our world. Some key takeaways I have for our listeners today are really around, two key points. One being electric propulsion feasibility. So that electric propulsion that we talked about earlier really has a, huge potential for short haul flights, but also the current battery energy density is a limitation for that larger aircraft requiring, further advancements and things like that as it, want to lighten the materials and also the hybrid systems. Second being what are the hydrogen fuel's zero emission potential. So hydrogen fuel produces only water as a byproduct, but challenges in storage and cryogenic systems must be resolved before it really can be adopted at scale in the commercial aviation. What about you, Dewayne? What are some of the key takeaways you have for our listeners?
Yeah, I got a couple. It's more about brand differentiation because that's what everybody's doing. Investing in these green technologies like electric and hydropropulsion can strengthen your brand differentiation, appealing to a different set of consumers and a different set of investors, which has always been the case. Of we got to move it forward. And then the next piece is just market leadership, and companies leading in these spaces may gain some market share and operational cost advantages as these technologies mature and become more economically viable. But also, they're showing their technical acumen to the space. And so, being able to solve these hard problems, which all these great companies in our industry can do and have shown historically, that they're those ones that are first to market to get there and solve it, get those patents in, start working at get those R&D down. Those are the businesses that are going to be lasting, 2030, 2040, 2050 and beyond. And so I'm really excited to see where the industry is going. So as we close out, so Rob, what's happening with you on a personal note?
And I think on a personal note, it's interesting to see we've been doing this podcast since February and it's close to the end of the year. So we're, right around the corner from Thanksgiving. And, this is like the part of the year where you're, wrapping up end of the year reviews, wrapping up a lot of, business travel engagements. So I think just a lot of focus right on just performing and closing the year out strong. And I just encourage others to do the same. I think this time of the year really reflecting on everything that was accomplished this year. And it's been a great year for us, hosting this podcast. So I think that's, I'll reflect on that. That's what's been happening in my world right now.
That's awesome, man. It's the same here as just trying to finish the year strong. A lot of opportunities have been coming our way that we got to close from a business perspective, but also a lot of opportunities for us to continue to push this brand and build this out. We got a lot in store that's coming up for us in 2025, but I'm really, really pleased on when we got together to bring this thing to bear and bring this to life. So I'm really, really pleased on how 24 is ending and what 25's got in store for us. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of the industry for both